everyone, welcome to Dnyanadeep Academy. So this is our daily answer writing series for geography optional. So we are taking daily one or two questions and we are trying to understand how we are supposed to write answers for geography optional. So today we have one more question from demography or population and settlement. Typically this is a question from paper 2, point number 7, that is cultural settings, and in cultural settings I have demography of India. Now I have made a combination of PYQ. If you look at the first part of the question where we are talking about the demographic transition in India, that India is witnessing a kind of demographic transition. So typical this theme has already been asked in previous year questions. What I have done, I have just added some contemporary issues to it. So I have said that India is witnessing demographic transition but with regional variation. Fine. So you have to discuss this particular part, right? Now when we talk about demographic transition, so many people might end up writing about demographic transition theory. Okay, so that is first mistake you are likely to do. Another mistake you will do, you may end up writing the whole demographic transition of India right from maybe independence or even prior to that. Okay, so even that is not required. Let us understand what all needs to be done in this particular question. First and foremost, let's take a look at introduction. In introduction, the best way I can introduce it with recent data or recent example. So I can have data from UN population. Time and again there is a lot of discussion regarding India's population transition or India's demographic transition. So keep following current affairs very well and pick data from current affairs and put that in your notes. So that is how you are going to do value addition of your optional notes. So be it for GS notes or even be it for optional notes, you have to pick some data from current affairs and add it to your notes. Please leave some space in your notes so that you are doing that value addition timely basis. Now when we talk about UN population data or other data I can have is from NFHS 5 data. So here you will have to mention ki earlier there was some let's say I'm talking about NFHS 5 data and here I'm talking about total fertility rate. So I will say ki so and so data reflected higher fertility rate maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and now today we have total fertility rate which is well below 2, right? So that is something you need to highlight because we are here talking about demographic transition. So it may happen that you will merely write, let us say, any random data. If I go for total fertility rate or population growth rate and I will say ki like India's total fertility rate has now dropped to 2.1 or even 2.0, that will not be sufficient because as we are talking about transition, so I will have to show the transition the best possible way. If you go for total fertility rate, go some 40-50 years ago data where we had a total fertility rate somewhere around 5, and now in 2024 we have total fertility rate somewhere around 2. So that will reflect demographic transition and that will directly hit with your question. So that is something you need to bring, or that is how good introductions can be written. So that was about my introduction. Moving on to body part. Now let us try to understand how many body parts are there. So first part is ki India is witnessing demographic transition. So first you have said ki India's total fertility rate has now declined and you are comparing from past data. So that is your introduction, but then you will have to elaborate what all demographic changes we have witnessed, right? And while doing so, you will have to give a historical perspective. Now again, mistake will be you might end up overemphasizing on historical perspective. What I will do, I'll just say in so and so year India was in so and so demographic stage and today India is in a particular demographic transition stage. Now when I'm talking about demographic transition stage, here I am invoking demographic transition theory, and that is where you are making a difference. Fine. So if you merely write about the present population data, or if you simply show that India's population is declining or has stabilized, you are likely to write GS type of answer. If I want to make that GS type of answer more look like optional type answer. So I will make use of these theories. I will quote these theories. Time and again I tell you, if you are writing answers for paper 2, bring in theories from paper 1. Fine. So whatever theories we have in paper 1, if we quote those theories in paper 2, that makes your answer look like optional answer. Otherwise, it will be GS answer. So here I am invoking demographic transition theory, and I will be stating that India has witnessed these many demographic transitions, and now India is in so and so demographic transition. Now this is something I'm just giving you a perspective. I'm not telling you answers. You will have to build your own content, your own unique content. Otherwise, what will happen? Whatever points I give, you might just end up writing those points, and that will not fruit into anything. Okay, so build your data, build your notes. Then further I will more talk about or more highlight present demographic status. Now when I say present demographic status, so here I will talk about what is the growth rate of population, what is the fertility rate, right, so on and so forth. Other than that, I will also talk about some urban and rural dimensions, or education or literacy dimensions, because that is also demographic status of India. And if I broadly interpret the term demographic transition, it is not merely about the changes in the population, right? So it is not about the merely changes of quantity. If I talk about demographic transition, I'll also have to mention some quality. Why I am talking about qualitative aspects? Because when I look at demographic transition theory, that demographic transition theory tells you whatever quantitative changes takes place in a demography. So if your population growth rate changes, fertility rate changes, size of population changes, it is because of socio-economic changes which are taking place in that society or in that demographic group. Fine. So that is why I will highlight see these demographic parameters have changed, growth rate has changed, population size has increased and might be stabilizing in next few years, or you will talk about fertility rate. So that is your demographic thing you are mentioning here. But then I will say all these changes have come out of socio-economic changes as well. So per capita income has increased, literacy has been better, employment status has been better. So India's economic growth has been better, and that is why I have all these situations. So again, I'm moving to next point, that is reasons for present demographic transition. So earlier I made comment on demographic status. Next, I gave you recently these reasons why we are witnessing this demographic transition. Now, do not elaborate this part too much because reasons have not been asked. We are simply at this moment talking about demographic transition. Fine. Moving on, mention. So, whatever is going to happen here, whatever is going to happen with the size of population, growth rate of population, or fertility rate, it is necessarily going to have some implications. Mention what future implications are going to be there. Emphasize on those future implications. Fine. So that is where you are completing your first part. Let's move on to the second part. In second part, you have to highlight what are the regional variations. Now, when it comes to regional variations, I have a method. I generally compare north and south, east and west. But here, what we can have, we know a demographic pattern is there. When it comes to India's demographic pattern, so southern states and western states like of Maharashtra and Gujarat tend to have a similar trends in terms of demography. So if I talk about, let's say again, total fertility rate or population growth rate, all these southern states as well as Maharashtra and Gujarat are likely to have similar growth patterns because their development or socio-economic status is same. Fine. And that is where I'm going to highlight regional variations. Now, when I move towards other part, that is northern Indian states, the states which are lying in plains, be it Uttar Pradesh, be it Bihar, there I have some crisis where there is still demographic transition has not taken place, or these states are still growing at a very high pace. Fine. So you'll have to quote numbers how these states are growing at a very high pace. Fine. And then you can again quote factors. What are the various factors which are contributing towards high growth rate in these particular states? Now, once I have done that, I have highlighted regional variations. I will provide reasons for these regional variations, and most importantly, again, there will be consequences of these demographic variations. Now, when it comes to the consequences of these demographic variations, some consequences are in terms of geographical sense, some issues there will be in terms of economics, there are some political consequences. So all consequences need to be figured in here. But you then will have to choose which consequences needs to be focused. So if I talk about the consequences in terms of geography, if I have a north, south or east, west or north and west variation, regional variation is there. Look at the consequence, present consequence, the flow of migration. If I look at the various parameters, migration in India has increased, point number one. At the same time, I will say that migration from the regions where demographic transition has not taken place is happening to the regions where demographic transition has taken place. So I have more migration from North India to that of South India. Quote case studies, quote examples, and that is how we are going to elaborate these consequences. Fine. So that is how I was supposed to address this particular issue. Now, additionally, can I draw maps, or let us say, can there be some graphs be drawn? Look at one point when it comes to geography optional: diagram, tables, graphs and maps are going to fetch you more marks. Okay, so I will draw some graph. What type of graph I can draw? So just take any parameter. Let's take growth rate. Make a graph of growth rate in your notes itself. Make a graph of total fertility rate in your notes itself, and remember those graphs. You can draw these graphs in your answer, right? In the real time, when you directly go into exam, you really cannot recall everything and make some innovations there. So exam hall is not the place where you make innovations. Whatever innovations you have to do it in your notes, and those innovations will be replicated as it is in your answers in the main exam hall. Fine. So that is where I am going to draw a graph. What about map? For showing regional variations, I can make use of map. I will show some state where demographic transition has not taken place so well. I will show other states where demographic transition has taken place well. So that is about making it more look like geography answer. Other than that, I have some red words here. So in your answer, what terminologies I'm expecting? I'm expecting demographic transition theory. I'm expecting something called as demographic dividend. You can talk about demographic disaster, if not demographic dividend. And in consequences, you should be mentioning words such as migration, migration patterns, so on and so forth. Fine. So these are the key terminologies I will be looking at, and that is how your answer now more looks like a geography optional answer. Okay. So that was one more question from geography optional. We'll see you in next session. Thank you.